Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Jazakallah for all participants for become part of our Islam study circle online. On behalf of Al-Mawrid UK, I'm your host Marathi Balishad, and it is our pleasure to have a company of Dr. Khalid Zaheer today. In our session of 60 minutes, there are four segments. Each segment will almost consist of 15 minutes. First segment will be from selected verses of Holy Quran. The second segment of 15 minutes will related to advanced learning related topics. The third segment will related to contemporary issues of 15 minutes. And the last session of question answer will be discussed. I would suggest you that the question answer you can write during the uh, Dr. Saab's presentation as well, so that you should not miss your any questions to be answered. So I'm going to hand over mic to Dr. Khalid Zaheer, and he will start to conduct the session, inshallah. And during the whole session, I will put your mic on self-mute mode. So if anybody wants to communicate with the instructor, you need to do the self-mute and then start to speak. Jazakallah. And Dr. Saab, please take the charge of the session, please.
Thank you very much, Maratib Saab. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the first segment, I have been making presentations on a few selected verses of the Quran. And I have been doing it in a sequence. We have reached Surah Al-Araf, which is the 7th Surah of the Quran. And today, I am going to read the translation of Surah Araf's 7th Surah's verses 172 and 173. The Almighty says, "When your Lord brought forth offspring from the loins of the children of Adam and made them bear witness about themselves, he asked, Alastu bi Rabbikum, am I not your Lord? They replied, Qalu, Bala, we bear witness that you are. This he did, lest you should say on the day of resurrection, we had no knowledge of that, or lest you say our forefathers associated others with God before our time, and we are only the descendants who came after them. So are you going to destroy us for what those inventors of falsehood did? We explain our signs in detail thus, so that perhaps they may return to us." I did the translation of an additional verse as well. In this particular passage, the Quran is telling us that the understanding and appreciation of God, one God, is not just an intellectual appreciation. It is not simply based on intellectual reasoning. Instead, the Quran claims that believing in one God only is more significantly a part of human nature. It is a requirement, an expectation of human nature that we believe in God and only one God. And the reason the Quran provides for this expectation is that the Almighty says that before coming to this world, we, that is humans, all humans were given the opportunity to experience the presence of God. What was the nature of it, of that experience? What form it took, we don't know. Most certainly, it seems that it was a spiritual experience, and all humans were unanimous in their understanding, their appreciation that they have experienced God. Um, God Almighty says that this experience is what I caused humans to go through, so that tomorrow on the day of judgment, they may not be able to bring forth an excuse that they didn't have any idea of it, and they were they were led astray by their environment or their forefathers. Uh, this is what the Quran says, and because the wordings of the Quran are such that when the Almighty is saying that He asked, "Am I not your Lord?" The Arabic of it is "Alastu bi rabbikum." So this "Alastu," which actually means "Am I not," is actually what caused this covenant to be described as Ehde Alast, the covenant of Alast. But obviously, the question is, we don't remember anything of that sort. How can we be held responsible for something we don't even remember? So why is the Quran making a claim which is based on a certain experience that it is claimed we went through? And the fact of the matter is that we don't even remember it. The answer to this question is this, that it is not necessary that we went through experiences in our past. And in order for us to accept and acknowledge that we did really go through those experiences, we must necessarily remember them. Now, at times we forget certain incidents, events, but there are other ways of us getting reminded. For example, I keep telling my students that I'm sure there was a time in my childhood days when, while fiddling with my right ear, uh, it got twisted. Uh, I don't remember the event, I don't remember the incident, the occasion, but each time I see myself, my face in the mirror, I can see my twisted ear, which reminds me of the fact that there was a time when I actually was fiddling with it, and I was doing it so strongly that it got twisted. Obviously, in childhood days, it's more likely that you cause these changes in your appearance to take place. Uh, Now, likewise, the Quran says that we did go through an experience. We have forgotten that experience. Why did we forget that experience? Because God wanted this life to be a trial. Had we all clearly remembered our meeting with God, one God, then there wouldn't have been any trial test for us humans to go through. So He caused us to go through the experience of meeting Him, and then caused that experience to be erased from our memory. Now, obviously, one might ask, how then can we uh, how then can we recall that incident? Uh, how does it affect us? Why would it be? Why should it be mentioned at all if we don't even remember it? Well, the answer to it is that, like in the case of my example, when I see the mirror and I see my twisted ear, I recall the occasion when, in my very early days, I was, fiddling with my ear and it got twisted. Likewise, the Quran tells us that if we look at this world around us, if we look at the marvelous design, the remarkable way this well-designed existence is causing human life to be possible. The manner we see that there are so many blessings in this life that we love, we like, and they have been given to us without us doing anything for it. And there are many other features of this life which we experience almost on a daily basis. If we care to look at this world with an unbiased eye, we will recall God and our experience with Him. Not the events of it, not the details of what happened, but we will recall His presence. We will be reminded of His existence, our contact with Him. And that is exactly what is called zikr. Zikr means to remember. You don't remember anyone whom you have not met. If I say that I am remembering my late father, my late mother, I say it on the basis of the fact that I had met them. And I fondly remember their faces, their behavior, their loving, caring ways with me. Now, likewise, we have a memory of God somewhere hidden in our soul. That gets revived when we are blessed with God's blessings, when we go through the experiences of the world that we are living in with an open mind, and we see that there is a mighty creator who seems to be there behind all this creation. He is a provider who has arranged for his providence to make sure that humans meet their needs. He is merciful and has caused this world, its beautiful existence, to be available to us without us deserving it. He is wise and his existence is full of wisdom. He is hearing and he listens to our prayers, etc. So all these signs of God and his presence are what cause us to be reminded of God, the one and the only, who is residing, who is there in our memory, in our conscience, in our soul. Uh, Prayer, formal prayer, salat, is meant to remember God. The Quran says in chapter 20, Surah Taha, verse 14, Aqimis salata li zikri. This is what the Almighty mentioned to Moses, Musa alayhi salam. Establish prayer for my remembrance. So we remember God and we remember Him because we came to this world with an appreciation of Him residing inside our soul. So this particular passage of the Quran, chapter 7, verses 172 to 174, are therefore reminding us, or shall I say, informing us about the reality that no matter whether we believe in God or not, whether we are conscious of His presence or not, He is there not just in the outside world, the world that is outside our personalities, but He is also inside us. We have had an experience of Him, and that experience causes us to feel His presence whenever we use our intellect properly. Whenever we are able to somehow manage to focus on understanding this world and the way it has been designed, we are able to temporarily cut off, sever our contact with the worldly life, which is what distracts us. God doesn't want us to leave this world. He doesn't want us to not take interest in this world and its activities, its expectations, etc. What he wants us is to live in this world with an understanding that we have been created by a God whom we met before we came to this world, and that it is his right. He deserves that we continue to remember him and we can continue to thank him. That finishes the first segment of my presentation that was to be on some passage of the Quran. Now I will move on to the second segment. The second segment is regarding, call it understanding Islam. We have been talking about a number of topics that have to do with Islam and the way it has been uh, given to us for us to understand and practice. We did a series of discussions on a number of issues that had to do with Deen. There is some noise in the background. I think somebody's system is unmuted. If you mute uh, your respective laptops or um, mobile phones, I think it will be. Now it's stopped. Thank you. So there are a number of topics that we've already done. If you allow me, I'll just mention what we did. We did the question as to what is Deen, where it has come from, and what is its target. We talked about the salient features of this Deen. We talked about the other sources of knowledge which some people claim are also authentic, like the Quran, the Sunnah, and Hadith. We did talk about the fact that the Quran and Sunnah are the basic core sources of knowledge of Islam, and Hadith is its footnote. We also talked about certain salient features of the religion, the religious message that we have got with us. We talked about the Quran in more detail, more particularly from the point of view of its coherence, thematic and structural coherence, Nazm Quran, Nazm Kalam. Then we talked about Sunnah, what exactly is Sunnah, and the various points of view regarding Sunnah, and their critical examination was done. And then we talked about Hadith, what exactly it is, what are its contributions, what are its problems, difficulties, and challenges. That enabled us to complete our first module. Now, thereafter, we started talking about the second module. The second module of our learning process is based on faith, Iman. Before talking about belief, faith in God, in prophets, messengers, and in the life hereafter, I raised a question regarding use of intellect. I raised that question because all discussion on faith that we will do, inshallah, we'll see that the Quran bases its discussion on intellect, use of intellect. However, there are many Muslims who very strongly feel, they contend that belief and intellect have got nothing to do with each other. Religion, there are many people who say religion has nothing to do with intellect. Religion is based on what we have been taught, what we have been delivered. So we don't need to use our intellect. The more we'll use it, the more we are likely to go away from religion. We'll get confused. There were many arguments that were presented by religious Muslims to show and prove that in religion, the use of intellect is discouraged. So I presented 5 arguments, of which 3 of them we have already discussed. There was one argument that said that because the Quran says that the God-fearing people are the ones who yu'minuna bil ghayb, who have a blind faith. Therefore, we are expected to have a blind faith. The other argument was that there is a verse of the Quran which discourages Muslims from asking questions. So we don't need to ask questions in religion. We just need to hear and follow. The third argument said that there are a number of verses in the Quran which require believers to samayana wa atana, to say that we listen, hear, and we obey. So the Quran expects believers to listen and obey, and does not encourage Muslims to use their intellect. I've already done the counter arguments to these three claims that have been made by religious Muslims. Now I come to the fourth claim, which is that there are Muslims who say that in Islam, you are not allowed to talk about predestination, taqdeer. It is said that the Prophet, may Allah's mercy be on him, once he saw his companions talking about predestination, taqdeer, and he stopped them from doing it, and he was upset to know that there were people who were talking about it, and he warned them that if they are going to continue doing it, it's going to be like what happened to the people of the earlier ummahs, that they went astray. So there are Muslims who say that this particular understanding is a very clear message to believers that don't use your intellect, or else you will get confused. So better stay as you are, as believers who are listening to whatever message is delivered, accept it and follow it. Now, obviously, the question is, what is the truth about it? The truth of the matter is that God Almighty has given us intellect to use and has required us to understand His religion through our intellect. However, like all other human faculties, human abilities, intellect too has its limitations. The Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, he, when discouraged Muslims from talking about predestination, in actual fact, required believers to know the limits of their intellect. He did not discourage them from using intellect. Instead, he guided them to know the limits within which they can operate while using their intellect. Now, what is so significant about the discussion of predestination that causes human intellect to not be able to appreciate what this particular understanding is all about? The answer to this question is that when we talk about predestination, we actually talk about God's attributes. God is our creator. We can't see him. The only way we can approach him, the only way we can come close to him is through his attributes, through understanding, appreciating his attributes. So God knows everything. When we behave in accordance with this understanding, appreciating, registering this understanding in our soul, and then behave accordingly, when we start feeling that God actually knows everything, and we become a part of the understanding of this attribute. So God has all the good attributes according to the Quran. All attributes of God are unlimited, infinite. So there are no limits on any of the Almighty's attributes. One aspect. The other aspect of these attributes is that it is not that his attributes take turns to operate. No, they are all operating simultaneously. So he is simultaneously at the same time uh, fair, just, as well as knowledgeable. His knowledge, complete knowledge, does not negate his attribute of complete justice, nor does his justice, his, his decision to be just under all circumstances, negates the effectiveness of his knowledge. Now, when we understand these two things together, we get confused. Not because this understanding is wrong, but because we do not have the capacity, the capability of God's appreciating the fact that God's knowledge is complete, and also the fact that his justice is also complete, and also the fact that the two are happening, the two are functioning at the same time, simultaneously. So the fact of the matter is that if, for example, the question that many a times troubles people is that uh, if God knows that a certain person is going to go to the hell and another person is going to go to the heaven, then what is the fault of the person who will go to hell? Because God would know it beforehand. And what is going to be the special merit of the individual who will go to the heaven when it will already be known, already been known that he will ultimately uh, destined, he will be entering the paradise. Now, the answer to this question, a simple answer, not a complete answer, but as much as we humans can understand, is that while a person will enter the hell because of the fact that he will do things wrong on his own volition, independently, uh, because he was given freedom and he exercised his freedom incorrectly, injudiciously, knowing that what he was doing was wrong. However, the fact that he will do wrong was known to God already. Uh, God's knowledge beforehand did not force the individual to do wrong. Had that been the case, then obviously it would have been unfair. Likewise is going to be the case of the person who will do good deeds and will already be known to God that he will do good deeds. So God's knowledge beforehand is a reality. And the fact that God is absolutely fair is also a reality. And the two realities do not contradict each other. So God would know that people will enter the paradise will be the ones who will deserve it and will do it on their own. Likewise, the people who will be destined to the will go there because of their own independent quality of
Excuse me,
piety.
Dr. Saab. The voice is not very clear. I'm very sorry.
Shall we wait?
Yeah, I think now it's better. Yeah, please
Fair
continue.
enough.
Thank you.
Right. So God would know it, but his knowledge would not force people. His knowledge would not force people to do things good or bad. Now, because this whole idea, we don't fully absorb it, we cannot completely fathom it, not because it's wrong, but because we are not able to completely understand it in the intellect that we have, which has limited capacity. The Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, he asked believers not to discuss this matter beyond a certain limit. Because if they're going to do it more, they will get to nowhere. They don't have the capacity for it. It's like if, for instance, uh, a master of mathematics is writing an equation or a theorem on the board before students of, let's say, class 6, and the students don't understand what he's writing, and they say that, we don't understand it, and therefore it's wrong. Well, that's not a good statement. That's an unfair statement. The correct statement for the students to make would be that we don't understand this theorem. We're not getting it. It is beyond the reach of our understanding. To say that it is wrong because we don't understand it is obviously a statement that is not fair. So about predestination, the expectation that the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, made was based on the limitation of human intellect, which is what the prophets have come to tell us. This intellect that we've got with us is brilliant, but you must use it properly. Don't misuse it. Don't use it in areas, in matters where it is not capable of operating properly. So that finishes segment 2. Now I come to segment 3 of today's presentation, which is always regarding some contemporary issue. The issue for today I'm going to speak on is the question of whether population control is allowed in Islam or not. This question has become extremely important in the poor third world country like ours, where the resources are scant on the one hand, and the population is already huge, and it is increasing by an alarming percentage. The end result is that the more there are people, the resources that are available to cater for their needs, they have to be divided to an ever increasing larger number of people. So, but we know that there are many religious people who very strongly believe that it is un-Islamic to resort to population control. Before I mention some of the arguments that religious people present against population control, and I present my understanding of what exactly is the truth about those arguments, let me give you an interesting perspective. When East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, and West Pakistan were one country from 1947 to 1971. We were students in schools, in colleges. In our school days, I remember we used to memorize the populations of the two regions of Pakistan, and the population of East Pakistan used to be around 10 million more than the population of West Pakistan. That was the kind of share of the population of the two regions. Now, if you look at the population of Bangladesh, it is much less than something like 30 to 40 million people, less than the part of Pakistan. How has this change taken place in Bangladesh? Well, it is primarily through what they call LOIs, leaders of inspiration, who have been instrumental in changing the minds of the local population. Those leaders of inspiration are actually the religious leaders, those who are delivering sermons in mosques, etc. The government of Bangladesh, in collaboration with international agencies, they arranged for programs, courses, training workshops for the imams of mosques. They would, convince them, they would train them, they would let them have the kind of facilities that should be provided to each region for in the form of medicine or other equipment for this whole idea to be implemented. And the end result was that there was a tremendous response. Obviously, there must have been resistance to begin with. There still should be some resistance. But by and large, the change has actually occurred. And also, interestingly, it's not that the religious people of Bangladesh or the religious leaders of Bangladesh are completely cut off and belong to a completely different point of view. They are influenced very strongly by scholars, scholars of West Pakistan. In fact, in Bangladesh, uh, the places where Urdu is still spoken are the madrasas. So, it's because of the influence of the scholars, religious scholars of West Pakistan or Pakistan, still exert on the religious scholars of Bangladesh. Now, what exactly are the reasons that Muslim scholars feel that population control is not desirable or is un-Islamic? In my opinion, there are three reasons that are normally presented for the purpose. Reason number one, it is said that the Quran says that God is the one who provides sustenance. He is the one who takes care of resources. The Quran says, for example, this verse is quoted, "La taqtulu awladakum khashyata imlaq." Do not kill your children out of fear of poverty. Nahnu narzuquhum wa iyyakum. We are the ones who provide them with sustenance, and you too. That is, you also are provided with sustenance by God. That's one argument. So what they say is that if you are going to resort to population control, then you will be preventing more children from coming to this world, which would mean that you are, in some cases at least, will be killing them. And the reason why you would be preventing them from coming to this world is that you think that the resources at your disposal are less than what are needed to take care of this large population. So they say that the Almighty says that He is the one who provides these resources. You don't have to bother about it. The second argument that they present is that they claim that the Prophet, may God's blessing be on him, he expressed his desire that on the day of judgment, his followers should be the largest in number, and therefore you should have more and more children. So if there's going to be a larger Muslim population, that would make sure that would enable the number of followers of the last prophet, may God have mercy on him, to be much larger than the number of followers of the earlier prophets. The third reason why population control is looked down upon by religious people is that they say that if we are going to start campaigning for population control and for measures to prevent children from coming to this world using contraceptives, then this is going to cause obscenity, extramarital sex to become more widespread because of the availability of those techniques which would enable people to prevent pregnancies from taking place. Let me take these points one by one. The first thing is that the Almighty most certainly says that He is the one who provides provisions to all. However, the context in which this verse was revealed was when in the Arabian society, there were people who were callously killing their children, particularly their daughters, by fearing that if they will allow their daughters to grow old, their kids to grow old, this would mean that they will have to feed them as well. And they could not anticipate how those newborn babies, more particularly if they were girls, could actually contribute in improving the financial situation, health of the family. The Almighty said that, well, this is not your job. I mean, killing your children, and that too out of fear of poverty, is something that you should be ashamed of. You don't provide provisions to your children. It is we who provide them with provisions and with sustenance. And by the way, we provide sustenance to you too. So don't get involved in killing them. When normally contraceptives are used for the purpose of population control, uh, it's not killing of children. It's just preventing them from coming to this world, preventing pregnancy to take place. Uh, these are two different things. These are two different realities. Uh, Obviously, there could be a number of reasons why parents would not want a new child to come to this world. Uh, Economic reasons could only be one possibility. But you have to take care of your children. You have to educate them, spend time with them, groom them. Uh, you have to look at the health of the mother. You have to look at the fact that mother has to spend a lot of time with her kids, more particularly when they're young, when they are in the first few years of their life. Uh, so it's not just economic reasons, but there are many other reasons which should be considered before taking a decision about bringing another soul into this world. Because when a new child comes to this world, he or she has to be taken care of. You've got to plan the future, and you have many other things to look at. You have your own planning for this world. You have your own ideas. You may have some projects of charity, of goodness in your mind, and simply by having a new child, another child after 2, 3, or 4, you may find yourself distracted. So this process of procreation that the Almighty has provided us with has been uh, has been described similar to the process of cultivation. So when we cultivate a crop, you've got to look at a number of different factors. You've got to look at the health of the soil. You can't overburden it. You know, uh, sometimes farmers, cultivators, they have to leave their land to rest for a while and not be burdened. So it's not just that when a child is prevented from coming to this world, it is simply because of material reasons, reasons that have got to do with resources that are consumed. It's not just a matter of how much wheat we have at our disposal and how much rice can be produced. Uh, it's a far more complex issue. And if you are certain that you can only handle, let's say, three children, and you can train them, you can bring them up, it's good for you and your health as well. Well, that's your decision. Uh, the second, the second part of it is that the Prophet, may God have mercy on him, it is said that he wanted his ummah to be larger in number. All these statements, whether in the Quran or Hadith, have got to be looked at in their proper context. Obviously, the Prophet, may God have mercy on him, did not want uh, the size of the ummah to be enlarged simply through children getting born into the families that were Muslim. Uh, he wanted Muslim Ummah to expand through the process of dawah. The quality of Muslims should improve. What would a large number do to help the cause of Islam? Uh, Quite often we see that when people are not properly trained and the population is large, you cannot teach them, you cannot groom them properly, they become a nuisance. They do not create a good impression. Is it true that the Prophet, may God have mercy on him, wanted us to prefer uh, quantity over quality? Quite obviously, if you have four children as against eight, you are more likely to provide them with better training, better guidance. Leave it to the parents, leave it to the individual. Tell them that there are a number of factors that you've got to consider. Having a large family is not quite as important as a family which is healthy, which is happy, which is positive, which has good morals, which is understanding Islam properly. And for that purpose, large number may not necessarily be the right answer. As far as the third concern is concerned, that is, if population planning is going to be promoted, then it's going to create obscenity in one way or the other. Well, I do share this concern to some extent. The manner some contraceptives are displayed in shops, uh, of pharmacy. It's not a great idea. It should be done in a manner that there is no damage done, and only the relevant people are approached. Advertisements, if any, should be provided, should be designed so that the possibility of them being misunderstood or misused is minimized. So, the concerns of religion should be taken seriously, but population control indeed is an important need of the Muslim society. That's all from my side. If you have any questions, I'm now ready to at least attempt to answer.
Wonderful. Jazakallah khair. Amazing. I think these all segments were very subjective and very lengthy. And in 45 to 50 minutes, Dr. Sahab has tried to explain very well. It is his mastery indeed. Uh, let's go to the question answer. Sister Rafia has a question. Please self-mute yourself and ask the question. Yeah, you can self-mute and ask the question. Jazakallah.
I can't do it.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me, Dr. Khalid?
I can hear you.
God provides sustenance for everyone in this world, including the new children. But does not God expect the people to work for it? If somebody is going to have 4 children, then if God is going to provide sustenance for the children, then the person concerned is also going to work to earn that sustenance. Am I correct?
I think you've raised a very important point. Thank you very much for that. The Almighty says in the Quran that when it comes to the question of sustenance, there are 2 components of it. There are 2 conditions that need to be met simultaneously for sustenance and provision to be made available. A, God creating capacity for it, God making sustenance available for someone, and B, that someone struggling and striving for it. So, for example, the Quran continues to tell us when it urges us to make a living. The Almighty says, "Ibtaghu min fadlillah." You look for God's kindness, His blessings. So, sustenance from God is a blessing that He provides as a potential. However, that potential would stay unrealized if you would not struggle and strive for it. So she's very right that when we are talking about the fact that God provides sustenance, we should also remind people that sustenance has to be searched for. It has to be looked for. And that is something where we must look at our own respective limitations. I think that is also a fact that needs to be emphasized.
Jazakallah. Yeah, Brother Mustaq has a question. Please do self-mute your mic and ask directly. Yes, Brother Mustaq. Yeah, you need to self-mute your mic. If you right-click on your mic, then it will be unmuted, and then you can speak.
Now I think I unmuted it. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear
you. I have a comment about the overpopulation. Overpopulation actually can be good. In some of the Western countries, and even in Japan, there's shortage of youth. The problem is not overpopulation. The problem is in developing countries, there are no resources to educate those people. Otherwise, there's a tremendous boon of having the youth in a country. And secondly, the maldistribution of the resources. Resources Majority of the people, poor people, they don't have any access to it. It's hoarded by a very uh, small group of rulers in these countries. Take the example of Pakistan. How many families control most of the resources? Just a handful. So those are the other issues that needs to be tackled. That's my question. Comment. I would appreciate your comments on this.
Mushtaq Sahab, I thank you for making those comments. I do agree that the distribution of income is very unfair in at least our part of the world, and therefore that is another matter that needs to be looked into. I do also agree with the fact that in Europe, in Japan, etc., the more advanced countries, because of the good quality medical facilities, the population is aging, and there are far greater number of old people that are still there alive, and there is a problem of new children coming to this world because of the fact that they are somehow reluctant to have children. That is absolutely correct, and I think that's another area where we need to look at and worry about. However, the question that I was addressing was not was not based on my conclusion that the economic problems, woes of our society are because of large population alone. Large population, more particularly in areas where the resources are already scarce, is one problem. Uh, my mention of the points that I raised was to address the question as to whether it is completely irreligious to talk about the possibility of population control. So my answer was that it is not. We need to look at the question of bringing in new children to this world with a balanced approach. On the one hand, obviously they are a great blessing, and therefore there is no reason why we should be reluctant to have children. On the other hand, the obsession with large number of children, no matter what the situation is also not what our religion has encouraged us to do. So we need to strike a balance. But thank you very much for mentioning the other aspects of the problem that we are confronting, and I think those need to be addressed as well.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Sab. It's Raza here.
Hello. Assalamu
Awesome. I would like to make a counterpoint to what Brother Mushtaq just said. I mean, I would disagree that this overpopulation is not a problem. We cannot take examples like Japan and certain European countries where the lifespans have gone so far up that there are far too many old people. And in general, it is a trend seen across the world, which is wherever there is higher individual income, right? Whether at a national level or individual level, there is a less tendency to have a lot of children. This is from a historical point of view, it has certain, the tendency to have a lot of children has certain biological needs as well, because in the past, the survival rate of children wasn't as high as it is today because of basic health facilities and all sorts of complications in the childbirth process. So it's almost as if it was like a rule of thumb formula to have more children for there to survive more offsprings, and then they would be able to then help you build a home and later on take care of the parents as well. uh, Overpopulation is a global problem. We cannot look at local examples and then based on that argue that that is not an issue because of overpopulation. what is happening in the world is that there is too much production, both in terms of crop and in terms of industrial production, that is causing a lot of pollution, that is also causing global warming. The growth, the crops that are being grown are causing destruction to forests. They are causing destruction to farmland itself. And this demand, because there are so many people and so much food needs to be produced, is actually putting a lot of stress on this planet. And the rate at which it is growing, it will be like 10 billion people in the next I don't know, maybe 20 years or so. So this is a global thing that we need to look at, and we need to look at it in that big perspective rather than localized issues. So that's one kind of counterpoint I wanted to make. And then there was a question that I wanted to ask regarding your first segment, which was where you talked about the covenant with God, which is Alastu bi Rabbikum. The story that I know is that all the souls were created and they were asked this question, who is your God? And they responded, we are your God. But then we see that later God says that Adam was created and the soul was breathed into Adam. So it kind of doesn't make sense to me, in the sense that the souls were already there who had already taken the covenant, yet this soul was being breathed into Adam as if it just came out of God. In a sense, it wasn't already there, present. So that's my question.
Right. As always, I would answer your two questions in the reverse order, because the last question is more fresh in my mind. And when I will answer it, I will hope that the first question is already forgotten. So the answer to the second question is that, when the Almighty says that He breathed His soul into Adam, نَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, the Quran tells us that such expressions are metaphorical. So we don't know exactly what is being talked about, except for the fact that there was a process which the Almighty undertook to cause a special feature added to the physical form of Adam for him to become different from what his predecessors were. There is no reason to believe that the soul which was breathed into Adam had nothing to do with the earlier souls. So if we are to reconcile and match the two stories, what it would mean is that the soul of Adam that was present at the time of the incident of Alastu bi Rabbikum was the very soul that was picked later by God to be breathed into Adam. As regards the first question, Raza, when we used to study economics in our own good old days, we were given to study a theory called Malthusian theory. Malthus propounded a theory wherein he said that while the economic resources, more particularly foodstuff, it increases at the rate, arithmetic rate, from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and 3 to 4. The population is increasing by geometrical rate. That is 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, etc. And he, according to his understanding, very soon the rate of growth of foodstuff is going to be far overdone. The number of people, the population growth would be much quicker, and therefore there is going to be a gap between foodstuff, granary, and world population. And then he predicted that as a consequence there are going to be, famine, etc., that will again bring the world population back to the same equation, as many people as there will be foodstuff. So, and that was one reason why there was so much stress laid on population growth. Later events showed that it did not work out the same way. And we had certain remarkable ways of increasing the crops, the yield per crop. There was a revolution in the agricultural field that we witnessed. And even today, as the world population is growing, so is growing the supply of foodstuff, etc. So, what I humbly am trying to say is that the Almighty has always been true to His promise that when humans come to this world, He also matches the supply of food, etc., by the same margin. However, that doesn't really mean that we should not worry about the number of children that we have in our society. What I tried to say in my presentation, but could not say as very clearly as I should have, my understanding is that even though it is true that food stuff, etc., is primarily the Almighty's, call it His decision, His promise. But as Rafia Sahiba very rightly pointed out, that it's not just His promise. We also have to do something to find it out. And therefore, we need to look at our resources and possibilities of how we will find out, how we will be able to search and locate the Almighty's blessings. That's number one. The more important problem is grooming, training. You see, we know, we see it with our eyes, left, right, center, everywhere, that, as you rightly pointed out, that there are poor families which invariably have a large number of children. And you know, one of the reasons why they have them is that not that they know that they think that some of them are going to die, God forbid. Things have improved even in the poor segments of our society as well to be good enough for hopefully all kids to survive. But they have more children because they are poor. And they think that another child would mean another possible earning hand. Whether boy or girl doesn't matter. Girls also earn now. So, you know, that kind of a problem. And the end result is that these kids don't get properly educated. I mean, it's not just roti, it's not just rice, it's not just breakfast that we should worry about. We should worry about schools as well. We should worry about the way we train our kids. So I think arguments from both sides are valid, are to be taken into account. There is no one clear statement for or against population control that can be made, but we need to follow a balanced policy wherein we need to have more children, but the number of those children should not be too high for us to not be able to discipline, control, and train them properly.
Jazakallah, Dr. Sir. Yeah, that's a very vast topic, and we can continue to cover even in the next session as well, and so that we all have a grasp meanings of that tragedy or dilemma of our overpopulation as a whole in a whole world. Sister Rabia has a question. Yeah, Sister Rabia, you can unmute your mic, please. Yeah, if you right click on your mic icon, then you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I heard what you said about predestination. I just would like to know that in the poor segment of our society, particularly in Pakistan, when a girl is born, very often you hear people saying, oh, just pray that her kismat is good. Or somehow it's not that the girl can also earn, but I would like to know in what context is kismat? Is kismat something that God has made for the child already?
You see, when we use this word kismat or luck, what we normally mean by it is that the person, the child, boy or girl, should have a good life, should be as much possibly free from mishaps, from unpleasant incidents in life, and should grow, should be successful, should lead a happy life, a healthy life, etc. We When we use this word, we mean the ups and downs in life, the various different phases in life which the Almighty has already decided about them. Uh, what I understand is that there are two aspects of human life. There is one aspect which we not do anything about it. I mean, obviously that we had no say in the fact that we were born to a particular parents. Likewise, in a certain society, at a certain point in time. Likewise, when we start undertaking our journey of life, there are various different things which we can do very little about. We'll have a certain height, we'll have a certain complexion, etc. But there are certain other things, quite a few other things about which the Almighty has left it to our discretion to do well and to do good for our future. Uh, he knows all about it, but his knowledge does not restrict us from doing as best as we can. And this particular hadith that has been referred to in the discussion that we had is actually talking about the more important aspect of our performance, and that is the performance in the moral life, in morality, in doing good or doing bad. That's one area where we have been given complete freedom. We have not been forced by the Almighty one way or the other, and yet the Almighty knows about it beforehand. So the hadith is actually stopped some people from taking this discussion too far, because discussing it beyond a certain limit would cause people to get confused, and therefore probably would not be very comfortable with their faith and with their understanding. But generally speaking, when we say the person, the boy or the girl, should have a good luck, what it means is then that the ups and downs in life, the journey of the life that the Almighty has destined for them, for which they can do nothing about, should be good, and the Almighty should would allow them to have a smooth sailing and a good life.
Uh, I don't think I was able to express myself properly. Among the poor people, boys, and among a lot of families, boys are very welcomed. But when a girl is born, the family, the relatives, they might definitely say, okay, another girl, Allah iski kismat achhi kare. So it really worries them that it's a daughter, not a son who's been born.
I would just briefly say two things about it. Number one, things are changing dramatically. I think the performance of girls, even in matters of looking after families, is now showing remarkable changes, improvements. I think people, generally speaking, are beginning to realize that girls, daughters are in many cases probably more helpful. But the other thing is that, it probably has to do with the fact that in most cases, because girls are married and sent to families other than one's own family, therefore they are destined to go to a region, to a territory, to a place which is unknown, and therefore you probably worry a little more about it. But as I said, things are already beginning to change.
Right. We are already running out the time. Already, I think 15 minutes is past. Um, I would like to have a last question from my side. And Dr. Saab, it is related to the second part, which is use of intellect in Islam. Uh, my question or concern is, there are many institutions in the world which are built on intellect. Like there are huge number of schools of philosophers who guided the mankind based on intellect. And then after that, the evolution of science and the awareness of the scientist based on intellect is also everywhere. So both institutions they use their intellect to or go about their findings, and they are continued till today. Then the third, the religion comes, and many religious, even scholars, they avoid to use of intellect in order to understanding many key concepts in religious concepts. My question is, how does Islam is different than the other religion to use intellect as compared to philosophical schools of thought and the scientific school of thought who are built on only intellect, not other stuff.
You see, religion has come to guide in a particular domain of human life, human interest, which is to explain the purpose of this life, to let humans know that they have been created by a God and that He has created man for a purpose, and that human beings have been given morality which humans are expected to value, and that as a consequence of their attitude and behavior, they are going to either end up successful in the paradise or they're going to end up unsuccessful in the hell. This is the message of religion. And the Almighty says that if you want to feel comfortable that this message is correct, it is from God, then use your intellect and you will know it. Now, philosophers have been struggling with the same questions somewhat. Uh, many of them believe in God, believe in life hereafter, believe in religions, but they also talk about some other issues. They when they talk about matters that have got to do with human concerns, uh, by and large, are distanced from God's message and they use their intellect independently. There's nothing wrong with it, except for the fact that at times they enter into domains, regions, which were not meant for human intellect the way it is limited now uh, to get into. Like I talked about the problem of uh, predestination and free will. So the Almighty, His message is actually available to us to accept, to believe in on the basis of use of proper, unbiased intellectual reflection. Philosophers, they do the same uh, in many cases without the help of, without the guidance of divine revelation, but not in every case. What has happened is that in case of many philosophers, they came up with their own theories, and when religious message came side by side, or in some other regions, uh, people did not did not do enough to be open to the message from God, to understand it properly, and to absorb it, and to critically examine and revisit their views. So, things have been happening side by side. Science has a completely different domain. It has restricted itself to understand what is visible, what is perceivable, to understand the laws and the principles that seem to be running this world, and to be able to find out how these resources and the principles of this life, the way this is functioning, can be effectively and usefully employed to make our life better, to have more inventions, more facilities made available, so that the quality of our life gets better and better. So, in most cases, scientific endeavor, scientific uh, quest is not in the same domain as that of religion. There is a lot of overlap in religious reflection and philosophical reflection, but not in the case of scientific reflection, even though many scientists do try to be philosophical in their approach as well. So, there are overlaps, you can't avoid it, but they have their, their own different targets to achieve, and their own respective methods that they employ to reach their respective conclusions.
Yeah, you are quite right that there is overlapping of these institutions or the thoughts on other because uh, the fact of the matter is many Eastern philosophies and religions like Taoism, Buddhism, even Hinduism, or other like these religion, they have a foundation philosophically, and that is approved by scientific phenomena, which they refer in their books, and that's why uh, people are very firm and very strong in their religion, although there is no as such concept or existence of God in their religion as compared to Abraham religion. But they are still firm in their teachings and they are very proud of them. So, what my point is, their religion is supported by scientific phenomena and also philosophical foundations, and hence their religion are based on intellect, purely on intellect. I have spoken with many Buddhists and also followers of Taoist, Taoism, and they are absolutely like us speaking religious scientist people, and they have a very genuine philosophical foundation, and they are very proud. Even, um, I mean, um, but as compared to them, our Abraham religion, Christianity and Judaism, and hence Islam, they use very like essential use of intellect. They are not entirely built on intellect. Otherwise, Islam would follow any specific philosophy, or they encourage scientists to come in science field, or people to come in science field. Whereas the fact is a different way. The Islamic or Muslims, uh, very committed Muslims, they are no longer scientists. Very less people are in as a scientist. Hence, very less people are as a philosopher. But that is the difference between Abraham religious followers and the other philosophies of religion as well, which I'm referring most Eastern philosophies, like I refer Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and many others are there. So I think that's a very clear line between two types of religion in the world based on intellect.
Uh, it's very interesting, Marathib Saab, and it's a long debate. I would suggest that the two of us we will interact during this week, and in next Sunday's presentation, I think I should take this subject to talk more about it. I think it's a very important subject that you've raised, and we should all talk about it in more detail.
No problem. Jazakallah. We are grateful. We are obliged that already I think 30 minutes is overdue as well. Um, so we thank you very much, Dr. Saab. Inshallah, we will continue. We will
Inshallah.
continue to talk on use of intellect in Islam and also the some ideas or key questions related to uh, population control, in addition to new verse of from the Holy Quran as well. So,
Inshallah. Okay.
inshallah. Thank you very much, all participants, and inshallah, see you in the next session. And I will announce the date and uh, for the reminding purpose as well. Jazakallah for everybody.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.